show. It is Daniel Workman coming to you live from the Dream Imaginate Sports Studios. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast, 6 a.m. out west, and all time zones in between and around the world. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate it. I can tell you that people are paying attention to what's going on here in America when it comes to American soccer. And I've known this for a long time. I've had enough conversations with people in and around the game that always leaves me with a sense of hope that somehow, some way, at some point, we'll get it right. We'll get it fixed. We'll get it set up properly. We will do things the right way. But I just want to say over these last few weeks, it has been remarkable how much people have engaged in the conversation. I am constantly getting messages on a daily basis from viewers and listeners, friends, just consistently telling their stories and sharing their insights and their experiences, your experiences. And it's been incredible. Yesterday, I received an email. And typically when we get an email to the show, it's hey man, I love what you're doing. I enjoy the content. Curious, I may have a question. But it's not very long. I mean, it's maybe a paragraph to 5-6 sentences. Not a big deal. Yesterday, we got a 3-page email, and you can see it. I mean, it's long, right? And I read through the entire email, and I was like, these are a lot of really good points, and the person who asked to be kept anonymous shared some personal insights into what they've experienced with the Development Academy and some of their observances with the system, and so I reached out to this individual and just said, hey, do you mind if we kind of share some of this on the show? Could we kind of go through some of the things you said in the letter on the show? We're more than happy to protect your identity, because I know that in American soccer, the unfortunate reality is a lot of people are concerned about speaking up and speaking out and the ramifications on their kids or on their own job prospects, etc. So I wanted to be sensitive to that, and we certainly did. So they gave us approval to do it, keep them anonymous, and I'm going to get to it in just a minute. But before I do, I just want to start the show with this premise today, and that premise is this: the United States Soccer Federation should be a federation for everyone. It should be engaged with the entire American soccer ecosystem. When we look at the U.S. Soccer Federation, they just don't do the federation thing very well. The Development Academy decision came out of the blue in terms of the timing, in terms of feedback with the club, the affected clubs, feedback from the American soccer family at large, silence. It was a decision that came, with no public Q&A, no back and forth. There's been a lot of money that has been put into the Development Academy system for all of its warts and ugly pieces and things that we've talked about on the show that we don't like about the Development Academy. You still owed those invested in the project a conversation before you shut it down. That's just decency. That's good leadership. That's a good federation. We don't see that from the organization, and it's infuriating. It's frustrating. It's maddening. It's any sort of descriptive words you want to use, and it's a head scratcher. Why do we do this? Why does this continually happen in American soccer? The federation is committed to the 1% at a federation level. And they have outsourced all of their responsibilities, all of their obligations and duties, according to their own bylaws that they're responsible for. They have outsourced those to other organizations. Their sole focus has been on the 1%. We're not going to grow the game across this country when we don't engage with communities across the country. Who's to say that Chattanooga or Knoxville or Nashville, Tennessee, Memphis, who's to say any one or all four could support one or multiple teams in each city? Quality teams, high-level teams. We don't know. But I'd love to find out. And I'm sure those cities would as well. Until we connect every single place in this country, every single person in this country, every single organization in this country, we can't say we're trying to do what's best for the country. Limited access, gatekeepers, arbitrary timelines and decisions, operating with silos, separation, segmentation, operating in a vacuum, you're closed off to the world around you, not listening to the stakeholders. All of these things are keeping American soccer from reaching its potential. It's not propelling it forward. We need a federation that starts to get to do good, to be good at being a federation. This email that I got yesterday was I felt was some really good comments about their own experiences, but also some of their observations. They said, "Hi, Daniel. I appreciate your comprehensive coverage of the U.S. Soccer Federation's decision to shutter the DA. My son plays, or as of this moment, played for a non-MLS academy. Although we heard grumbling for a while, the way they delivered the message was obviously discomforting, if not somewhat inappropriate given our experience. If not somewhat appropriate given our experience. Meaning this is status quo. This is the way the federation does what they do. People are used to this type of dysfunction. Below are a couple general observations I'd like to share with you. Hope this adds some flavor to the soup in the pot you've been stirring." And on that note, the pot that I'm stirring, it is always from a place of how do we get better? How do we reach and strive as a country for excellence? We have been historically a country that sets trends, that does things that no other country has done. This has been our MO in the past. We may not be great at it at the moment in certain areas of our daily lives, but it has been historically an American experience to strive, to dream, to build things and do incredible things. We've seen companies like Apple and Disney, Google and Facebook, Ford, company after company, idea after idea, Edison, Einstein, all of these great people of the past who have been dreamers and built dreams. That's America. And that's who we can be in American soccer. Tub thumping. The DA gets knocked down, but won't get up again. Pardon the pun. In many ways, the U.S. Soccer Federation ran the DA like a mediocre tech startup. It began with a vision and strong ideology, i.e., identify the top American soccer talent, create a competitive environment for those players to grow in, harness that talent to accelerate the U.S. national team's presence in the world game. But like many failed startups, the ambition fell way short of the implementation. In particular, the organization pivoted quite frequently and often took unexplained detours that led further and further astray from their original intent. The common theme pervading many of those redirections was the desire to replicate the success of other nations while blindly ignoring the clear benefits of the American populace, a large, diverse, and industrious community with a passion for exceptionalism. Rather than tap directly into that rock and roll zeitgeist, they attempted to string together a greatest hits of European style and strategy. Ultimately, they were complacent to be a high-functioning cover band. So it's no surprise we didn't get Zeppelin. We got Chumbawamba. Rest in peace, the U.S. Soccer Development Academy. One note that I want to add to this part of the message, when they laid out the common theme here of looking to Europe and ignoring the clear benefits of the American populace. There are a lot of people that think that we have to copy Europe to do soccer well. And I disagree with that notion. We don't need to copy Europe to do it well here. But we should learn lessons, best practices. And one of those best practices that we need to do is fully embrace opportunity and access. For coaching courses, opportunity and access for players and coaches and scouts, clubs, based on on-field performance. Are you getting the job done on the field? Is your team developing players? Is your team winning? That should be entry into the next round. Not who you know, not how much you're worth, or how much you've paid to gain access. It should be based on what you do, sporting merit. So that piece we can learn from the rest of the world, and it should be implemented here. Because that is actually part of the American fabric, opportunity and access. That was the core piece of the story. We should have open markets in all of our sports, not just soccer. But I agree with this viewer that sent the email in talking about tapping into our large, diverse, and industrious community with a passion for exceptionalism. We don't do that right now. The Federation is not reaching out to the best minds. They're not trying to get things opened up in all 50 states, get things connected in all 50 states. They're not working feverishly to take the number of professional clubs in this country and triple or quadruple or 10x across the country. But they should be. They should be trying to support that kind of growth. After all, that's what they state their mission is, to make soccer in all of its preeminent forms grow the sport in all of its forms. Self-centers. My son was fortunate enough to be invited to around a handful of U.S. soccer training centers. I don't know why I still capitalize this, knowing they likely carry little value. Occurring 3 to 5 times a year. They would mainly be run by a rotary of local college coaches, although my son did notice a few familiar faces each time. The structure was rather underwhelming, a short warm-up, maybe some small-sided games or rondo finishing with a scrimmage. Sometimes they skip most of the formalities and jump quickly into 11v11. Not that I fault them for that, since it felt like the intent of the training center was less an introduction to U.S. soccer and more a stage 2 vetting of the potential player pool. One may also assume this was more of a function of U.S. soccer budgeting than a disinterest from that age group's U.S. soccer coaching staff. Parents were strictly forbidden from watching. Even DA coaches were told to scram. However, most of us lingered and remained silent observers, not out of defiance, but more about the lack of dining and shopping options around a suburban office park after dark. Although he was invited to every training center, the Federation never provided any feedback. If my son was 40 out of 40 on the depth chart, I understand his national team potential was likely subfractional. But there was a reason he and the others were chosen. There was something worthwhile exploring in these players, many who were asked back as frequently as my son. It seemed like a missed opportunity to engage this group, more than half of them from non-MLS clubs, and possibly challenge them to show progress. If they felt this way toward this tier of players, I have to imagine their attitude toward the remaining were as dismal. If, in my case, my comment is definitely more dismal. Just as an example of the way the relationship U.S. Soccer had with its participants. We wish, but know that the U.S. Soccer Federation isn't spoiled with a backfield full of Van Dijks or a succession of Iniestas to choose indiscriminately from, so I never understood why they wouldn't do more with the wider net they cast. And now, with no apparent future plans to run training centers beyond the MLS clubs, U.S. Soccer seems to have completely excommunicated a large portion of their former player pool. I have to think these moves are driven by incompetency rather than purposeful callousness, by a small group that is myopically zoned in on their singular target, a highly competitive first team. Their peripheral vision artificially limited, electing to fixate their eye line on the MLS as the panacea, the 1% over everyone else. All the huffing and puffing blew it. The problem with U.S. Soccer putting all their eggs in the MLS Academy basket is that it just doubles down on a system that will not produce the quality of players to compete on the global level. The MLS Academy structure is equivalent to the European and South American systems only in name. All professional academies provide free training for players, but in reality, that's the smallest of the financial incentives when compared to in the winning lottery ticket that is a professional contract. Unfortunately, MLS contracts pay out more like the jackpots on scratch tickets than Powerball. Many young players make the league minimum, $48,000. So then why do some parents drive their kids 2+ hours each way, 4 days a week to participate on an MLS academy? It's simple. There is something more valuable to American players and their parents: access to top U.S. universities. Not only is a scholarship worth as much or more than a 1-year contract, granted very few kids get full rides, but more importantly, it comes with a promise of a future income in perpetuity. If you peruse the roster of the Division I soccer programs in the U.S., it shouldn't surprise anyone that the majority of these rosters are filled with MLS Academy players, as well as former Academy players from prestigious foreign clubs. There is a difference, however, between these two groups. American players are using Academy as using the academy as a foot in the door. Scholarships, financial aid to complement a borderline GPA at the best colleges in the country. In contrast, foreign players are using degrees from American universities as the fallback to an unsuccessful run at a pro career. So herein lies the flaw in the source code of U.S. soccer structure. MLS Academy Soccer is a player's best path to college soccer. And college soccer will most likely inhibit or atrophy our top players' development. In Europe and South America, superstars are made in those key initial years of adulthood. Our system drives the pool of potential first-team players away from the global game and towards an Americanized replica synonymous with obligatory physical and direct play, unlimited substitutions, massive rosters, and a sacrilegious clock counting down. You have to step back for a minute and see the pure irony in all of this. Teenage soccer players were thoroughly scolded for the thought of wanting to play soccer on high school teams with their close friends. The DA huffed and puffed that the drop in the level of play from that 2-month high school season would drag the quality of soccer down dramatically. The MLS clubs huffed and puffed that the drop in the level of play in the DA from having to compete with local non-MLS academies was unacceptable. Enough huffing and puffing blew the house down, leaving only the poured cement edifices of MLS academies to remain. Because of COVID-19, but not really, U.S. Soccer cut their expenses and outsourced top youth development to the MLS. But that just locks the federation into a loveless, arranged marriage doomed to empty nest syndrome as their most talented continues to pack up and head to college. This relationship smacks more of submissiveness than a partnership, and given their lack of a formal plan beyond the dissolvement of the DA, will likely only paint the current U.S. Soccer Federation leadership into a corner. The Federation needs the MLS way more than the MLS needs the Federation. For the rest of us, the death of U.S. Soccer's DA program may be a blessing in disguise. Spurned clubs will regroup, realign, and reinforce their foundations away from the huffing and puffing. With the burden of U.S. Soccer's international success resting on the shoulders of the self-isolated federation, the clubs have the freedom to succeed with ingenuity and creativity as opposed to being bequeathed the right by a higher power. Spurned players will have options, possibly finding a synergy at the club in high school. With the recent news, it certainly feels like soccer in the U.S. has taken a few steps backwards, but shifting formations into a defense posture is often tactically important. Let's hope the grassroots side of the sport, which drove its popularity, can team tackle this and retake possession. Thanks for taking the time to listen to my views. Keep fighting the good fight. A viewer of the show. Great ideas and great thoughts, and I appreciate those. And I agree with much of what this viewer had to say. Our federation owes it to this country to lead well. It's in their very paperwork, their bylaws, and in their own mission statement that they are to grow the game in all its forms for all Americans. And it's time they begin to fulfill that obligation. Our sponsor this half hour is Ductig Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. If you go there today and you find like some really cool apparel or some of those flashcards that like already have the field printed on them, Go in and place an order, get them in. You're going to be glad you did. And when you do, use promo code DWSHOW. You'll get 10% off of that order. Again, that's DWSHOW, and you'll get 10% off of the order at ductigbrand.com. Coming up right after the break, we have the very first interview with the new club joining NISA out of New York, New Amsterdam Football Club. Look forward to bringing that to you. Max Mansfield, the sporting director of New Amsterdam Football Club, coming up right after this. Like to welcome in Max Mansfield. He's the sporting director of New Amsterdam Football Club, based in New York, a new club that's coming into NISA. And Max, welcome into the show. Thanks for spending some time with us in the midst of all this pandemic and crisis, to be able to kind of spend a few minutes and pick your brain and get your thoughts on the new project, the club, etc. Really appreciate you spending some time with us.
For sure. Yeah, glad to be here. You're actually you're our first podcast, so
Well,
congrats.
we're excited to have you,
Cool. Very cool.
and really glad you're able to get on. Tell us a little bit about the project, New Amsterdam Football Club. Exactly where is the club going to kind of base out of, and give us a little bit of the origin story of the project.
Yeah. So New Amsterdam Football Club was started by myself and Lawrence Gerard. He is the president and founder of the club, and he runs a successful health tech startup called Fruit Street Health. They're actually doing some pretty cool COVID-19 stuff. So he's crazy busy. He's actually having me doing night shifts there as well. So I've been pretty busy as well. But New Amsterdam Football Club, we started it together as a joint venture. Him and I met a few years back through the kind of New York City soccer community. He was kind of just starting his health tech startup, and I was founding my consulting group called the Football Project, where we kind of took it upon ourselves to help overlooked U.S. talents, both on the youth and men's side, transition over to pro clubs in Europe and semi-pro clubs in Europe. So him and I connected about 4 years ago. He's a native New York. We actually played together at youth level. We only found that out later. But we connected, and we had this sort of vision to help out, emerging U.S. talents. And last year, actually, we went over to England together. We moved to London, him and I, and we were heavily involved with a lower tier club there, where we tried to put this principle into play. But we were met with a lot of restriction in the kind of system there, in the infrastructure of the game, to bringing over U.S. players. So when NISA kind of presented us with the opportunity to apply a similar, blueprint, we just, we took it and ran with it, and here we are.
So in terms of the blueprint, can you give us, if you got some secret sauce, I totally get it. But overall, kind of the big idea, what is the blueprint of New Amsterdam Football Club?
I would say that it's twofold. On one hand, we firmly believe that there is a ton of untapped talent, in our backyard in New York, in New Jersey, all across America. We think there's just guys that have fallen through the cracks for whatever reason. They didn't play at the right club. Maybe their parents couldn't afford it, but they still have the ability to play at a high level. And with my consulting group that we started, we saw that guys that were, no-name players in America could go over to Europe and make a name for themselves. And, once you strip away, looking at just the bios of players and evaluating them based off what they can do, on the field, you enter a whole different ballgame. So I would say that's one side of it. Then the other side is that New Amsterdam is heavily involved in moving players on, right? I do believe, NISA will grow. I firmly believe, we both do, in their mission. But with that said, we also want to move players on to Europe. We don't necessarily want, a 17-year-old kid that signs a contract with us that, New Amsterdam is their first and last destination in pro football. We want to nurture them. We want to get them pro games and then move them onwards. That's the fundamental principle.
In terms of looking at NISA, what excites you about that ability to bring in that undiscovered, untapped talent in being able to move them on? I mean, a lot of people talk about, these giant gaping holes in the American soccer system. We talk about it regularly on this show. But in terms of putting that into practice, actually doing it, pulling it through, bringing it in. What excites you about finding that undiscovered talent? Where does that motivation come from for you?
I think growing up as a player in the States myself, um, I saw players around me that maybe didn't have the opportunity to go to Europe the way I did, that were maybe more talented than I am or was. And just to see that and to understand that, to see both sides of how, Europe lives and how America lives in terms of football, I just immediately I knew I wanted to give back to the game in the sense that, offering an outlet or a pathway for U.S. players to, make a name for themselves, get some pro games, get some experience, right, that they can't get otherwise because they have to choose, college or club, and then move them onwards. And I think, 98% of 18-year-old, 17-year-old American players are not ready to play at a pro level in Europe. They aren't. But that's not to say that with a year or two, maybe 3 years of, good development after the U17, U18, formerly DA window, if they get that experience and that training, I think they can make the jump. I think it's very possible.
When you look at the American market and you compare it to, let's say, the European markets and the different leagues, countries, Germany, the Netherlands, Italy, Spain, England, France, some of these well-known leagues, and they're known for different, different leagues are known for different things, but we all know that their standards generally are above the American standard. I've often thought about the aspect of some of what you're talking about as an opportunity for the U.S., at least at this point in our history, these pro clubs to do what you're talking about, which is to take these 16, 17, 18-year-olds, and rather than playing them in a sheltered DA environment with U17s or U19s, those who are ready and able, who can kind of show that they're capable of. Obviously, not every 16, 17-year-old's able to, but there are enough. It's a big country to find enough players that could, begin to develop in a more professional environment that includes maybe some first-team opportunities in a league like NISA. Is that something that is going to be a priority for you guys, that these young bloods that you find get integrated into, on the field in NISA, as well as just, training with the club?
100%. 100%. I mean, I think the first thing when we started in Amsterdam was having a youth academy. And I think that's something we want to implement. If it's not our own in-house one, it's, creating those ties. And I think that's a big issue in America, is that there are no ties, right? There's a ton of NPSL, PDL clubs, right? And they're tied maybe to colleges a bit, but there's not a lot of direct ties to the U19 of that youth club. And I think that is where the complacency comes in the development, right? If I'm, a U17 player on my academy and I'm the best player on my academy, right? What does that mean? I can get complacent. If I'm succeeding at that level, then what's my motivation to continue, right? Whereas if in Europe, if I'm the best player at 17, I'm going up to the first team. And I could go up to train twice and get the shit kicked out of me, but then I come back to my team and I'm like, I have work to do, right? And I think that's the biggest mindset gap that we're kind of failing our U.S. players, is that they have this complacency element. Like, maybe I can rely on my left foot and only my left foot because I can score 20 goals at my DA level. But is that really going to carry me to the next level? And by the time I'm addressing those things I need to work on, I may be 18 or 19, because that's the first time in my life I played against grown men, right? So I only got exposed at 19, and my development cycle is already, 50% of the way done. So that, I think, is something we are trying to definitely do. Take a 17-year-old kid, take an 18-year-old kid, and throw him into ice cold water. Throw him into a game that he may not be mentally prepared for. But then you see the sink and swim, right? Maybe they can handle it, and we're all shocked. It happens all the time. You look at Schalke, all their best players. Leroy Sané, they threw him in against Real Madrid in the Champions League. The guy wasn't mentally prepared for that, but he goes in and he scores a banger and his market value increases to what, 30, 40 million overnight. It's like nobody knew that. People knew he was a talent, but you can only put them in those uncomfortable situations and see how they react. And if they fail, they go back for 3 months to youth academy, and then they can come back again. It's not the end of the world, but at least they made that mental experience like, hey, I'm 16, I'm not the man. I'm not the best player out there. There is something bigger that's out there, and I need to work to that. So I think that's the question we're answering.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, there's a little bit of a myth in terms of football clubs. A lot of people will classify them in a very black and white manner. Like you're a development club, you're a veteran laden club or a seasoned club or a club that's competing for championships. I think Liverpool has been a club recently that's shown they're willing to bring in and kind of, bleed in some of these younger guys in some of their cup games and bringing in the likes of Jones and Harry, I'm forgetting his last name, younger guy that's like 16, 17 that played in a lot of their FA Cup this year matches and several others. Trent Alexander-Arnold came into the team young a few seasons ago, and they've been able to kind of mesh him in. So this idea of bringing in young talent and getting them exposed, I think we need more of that in American soccer to really develop players. I'm excited about that part of your plan. In terms of the club and location, do you guys have an idea what part of the city? You got 5 boroughs there in New York. It's my favorite city on earth. You have an incredible name. Where are you looking at in terms of the geography in and around New York?
Yeah, so obviously real estate in New York is always a big challenge, and we want to provide access via public transport. So right now we're in discussions with Fordham University. They're located in the Bronx. They have a pretty easy 20-minute train ride direct from Midtown Manhattan. So we definitely like that. They have the facilities, right? They have, enough stands. Manhattan is tricky. The Cosmos are looking to come into Manhattan, which would be cool because it'll be a tight rivalry. But we'll mainly play our games out of the Bronx, and then we'll train probably Upper Manhattan or the Bronx as well. Again, we're going to attract players, mainly local guys. That's an emphasis that, I want to stay true to. So I think, making it accessible for everyday stuff for these guys is going to be critical.
The city is, like I said, it's my favorite city. It's a cool city. Your name, New Amsterdam Football Club. I'm just curious, as you guys were, dreaming, talking about the idea of a project, who came up with the name and like what was the origin of that? Like it to me, it was a no-brainer. Like when I saw the name, I was like, this is going to be cool. I mean, hopefully they don't fall on their face, but like that's a cool name. So yeah. Where did that come from?
So I can't take credit for it, but I came up with the concept. I actually play on a 5 against 5 local team in the city, and I have played there for years with a guy named Carlos Guaguande. He actually was capped by the U.S. full national team, so I got to give him a shout out. Otherwise, I think he'd break my knees with a baseball bat. But he had the name New Amsterdam Football Club, and when we were thinking of names, there was a lot of the Bronx FC. They wanted to be very borough specific, but I wanted it to be more like a European club, laying on old world foundations, things like that. And then it just kind of clicked. Let's just go with that. And we were a little worried because it wasn't tied directly. We didn't know if people made the connection. But then when the logo came out and the ship and stuff, we were like, this is the one. People are gonna love this. And I don't mean to, throw my fellow New York clubs under the bus, but I don't think they did a killer job with their branding or their marketing. So I think, New York was ripe for a cool, hip, urban soccer team. And I think we addressed just that between our logo and our branding, and our fans will see that.
Yeah, look, between the two clubs in NISA, you and the Cosmos, you guys have the two best New York soccer football icons, logos, branding. So not bad for the league. I think it's it's great too that you've got two clubs. I'm a big proponent, especially right now in American soccer, that we need to encourage more local rivalries. And it's something that I've talked to many people behind the scenes about, this concept of going around, and if you're going to put or find a club to launch, try to find a partner somewhat close to build a little bit of local rivalry. As you guys have been talking through the launch of New Amsterdam Football Club, how much has this idea that, you know, you've got this legacy brand, the New York Cosmos, as part of your local rivalry setup to come into the league?
Yeah, we initially, when we put the plan in place for a NISA club, we looked at other places. We looked in Florida. We looked in Connecticut as well. But Cosmos wasn't admitted yet. They weren't announced yet, so we actually didn't know. And then when they were announced, it was like, all right, like this could stir up for some really cool things. I'm a Dortmund fan myself, and like, you know, anybody in my family would tell you, like, the most important game of the year is Dortmund Schalke. Like, anything else could go down the drain. So long as you win that game, like, times are good. So growing up around those kind of derbies, I realized, like, man, that's the biggest thing. That's what the fans get up for, especially in a market where, you know, realistically, we're not expecting in our first year our fans to come out west midweek when we play Oakland Roots. So those home games where they can travel, you know, 15 minutes to Columbia or wherever it is that Cosmos does end up playing, like, those are going to be the big ones, the traveling support, the derbies. And I think, you know, that's what you get amped for. That's what these fans live for. And they've been craving, I think, for years now.
Back to the development angle, how important is it to have that kind of raucous, emotional, passionate environment for a young player in their development?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my earlier point. It's like the sooner you can make those experience in your development cycle, the better, right? When you can process that at 17, which is again a tough pill to swallow, but then it becomes the norm, right? We're not, if the kid has a horrible performance, we're not gonna cut him or get right. We just understand that it's a learning experience, and they get the next one, and we have to be patient with it, right? I still think we're going to be a competitive team, but I think for a 17-year-old kid that, you know, is used to playing, you know, a no-name game up in Connecticut, let's say on a Sunday, playing Friday night against the Cosmos in front of a couple thousand fans, that's a different animal, and in its entirety. And I think that's it. I think it's a good experience. I think it's a growing experience. You know.
Looking at philosophy, you know, you're talking about developing players, and you being the sporting director for the club and the project. What kind of identity do you hope that New Amsterdam Football Club has on the field?
I would say we want to stay true to a modern attacking style, right? I don't think we're going to develop players if we're just teaching them to kick it long every time pressure comes. When I saw a couple NISA, I saw the championship as well as a couple of games, regular season games, and they stayed true to that as well. They kept the ball on the ground. They looked to play. It was direct at times, and I understand that. But our identity is, again, we want to develop high-paced, attacking style football that, you know, puts a show on for the fans, but also develops players the right way so that they can go into another system quite seamlessly. I think that's going to be a big importance to keep that from the youth academy all the way up to keep that club identity.
New York's a big animal. Manhattan's huge. I mean, people think of New York and they just think of Manhattan, and they often forget about, you know, the four other boroughs. But it's a massive city. It's our biggest city in this country, and it's obviously one of the icon cities of the world. How important is it for you guys as you're planning your launch and going in to really building this brand and identity as an organization to really get into New York and really establish the brand of New Amsterdam Football Club in the city?
Yeah, I think it's a ton of small initiatives that add up in the long run, from on the field to fan experience. So for example, on the field, I would be shocked, right, if roster didn't consist of 80% local guys, right? And I think that in itself, if it's a coach of a team, or if it's a guy who's you've seen play at the park during the off season, but who's still at a high level, right? It's a guy that you can connect with a little more than, let's say, a journeyman who's in his early 30s that's, playing 7 different MLS teams, which, may be impressive as well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I don't doubt him as a footballer, but you want to create those connections where, yeah, you are a little awestruck, but it's also a guy who's in the community, a guy who's not that distant. So if I'm, a 9-year-old kid living in the Bronx, like, I see a pathway. It makes sense to me. My brain can process it. He grew up here, he lives here, and he plays there. Like, I can do this. This is not some foreign concept that I think a lot of youth players struggle with. So I think that is to kind of get the community, the younger fan involved. And then for the older fan, I think we want to do local things, right? We want to have local food vendors, local craft beer. My personal dream is to have the halal guys, which is like the famous halal cart, to get them having the halal cart, among other things, at our tailgate party or stuff like that, that I think gives it that urban vibe, that gives it that New York City feel. Craft brewery. We've talked to Brooklyn Brewery as well about setting up, kind of initiatives as well. Just to keep it honest, keep it real. I think New Yorkers it's such a tough market because they'll call bullshit on anything. And I think just staying honest with ourselves and why we built this club, that message will come through pretty organically.
There's not a lot of brands, organizations, clubs in the sporting arena in America that really taps in, I think, in a very authentic, this is who we are, this is where we're from. I think the Oakland Roots did a fabulous job with their launch and their branding and kind of building the identity of their club out in Oakland. Obviously, we know the stories that coming out of the NPSL into NISA now with Detroit City, Chattanooga, both, I think, clubs really representative of where they're from. But those stories have not been duplicated all over the place. When you look at the Cosmos, because of that legacy brand and kind of this, icon global, past of the NASL and Pele and all of the famous names and players that have been associated with that club, it feels like a big brand, even globally. Like, people have heard of or know about the Cosmos, and a lot of that has to do with that deep legacy that goes back decades. Obviously, in recent past, they've not been able to kind of get back that glory and really retain or resume in where they want to be. Although I know, Rocco and the rest of New York Cosmos organization work for that and dream of that and want to build that. You guys coming in, being, a new team, a new club, what are you hoping a New Amsterdam Football Club supporter, what are you wanting them to feel and experience that they know, like, this is my club? Like, you can have the Cosmos, you can have NYCFC or any other, soccer related organization. Like, New Amsterdam Football Club is me. I am them, they are me. Obviously, those are the hardcore supporters that you want and that you look for. What are you hoping they feel when they interact and get to know and come to your matches?
Yeah. First of all, I'm a little upset that Beckenbauer didn't come up when you were naming all those Cosmos traits.
He's there.
I'll let that
There's
one
so
go.
many. I knew once I opened the bag, right, it was going to be like, oh, crap, I left this guy off.
Doomsday.
So I just stopped at Pele since he's in the conversation for greatest of all time, and I just decided to stop there. But go on.
Fair enough. I think I think clubs, fans will identify with us because at the heart of it, we will be a working man's club, right? We're not going to pay guys astronomical wages. It's not going to be something distant. It's going to be honest. We're going to expect our players to give everything on the field, every game, every training session. I think that will come through. So for an NAFC fan, I think it's something they can relate to. It's a working man's club. It's the everyday struggle that, these guys have to get up and get to work the same day, the same way you guys do. It's not some different parallel universe with, Ferraris and Corvettes. They go through real life the same way. And I think that gives the fan at least something to be on the same wavelength with, that it is a working man's club. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there are many, if at all, real like working man's clubs in the United States, because it's just developed as not a blue collar sport. It's always been a white collar sport. And I think we're somewhat changing that, in that we welcome everybody. We don't care where they're from. And I think that's a New York value, that from our roster to our fans, it doesn't matter what walk of life you come from, what your income is, what your background is. At New Amsterdam, you're welcome. And the football is, our common denominator that binds us together.
In terms of getting players overseas, you've talked about that being something that you want to do, a priority for you. If a younger player who's like, hey, I wanna try to give it a go. I'm a young kid in the Bronx. I'm in Brooklyn. I'm in Queens. I want to give it a go, and I want to find out more information about you guys, NAFC, and what the next step prospects are in terms of like playing for you guys, and then what can you do for me? Where could I kind of go? Where do you guys look to be able to get players into in terms of opportunities over in Europe?
Yeah, that's probably our strongest point, and I think the strongest reason why we can attract youth players. I've been doing it now through the Football Project, it's called, for the better half of 5 years, and that's all we do. We take overlooked players and we bring them into clubs into Europe. And by clubs into Europe, it can range from anywhere. We've gotten guys into Schalke, which is a Bundesliga club, highest level. We've got guys into fourth league Germany, and they can make a living there. We've gotten guys into second league Sweden, first league Belgium, first league France. So the contacts are there. That's all I've been doing for the past 4 years, right? I haven't been coaching. I haven't been occupying my time with other things. We've strictly been helping open doors for youth players as well as men's players. And we've landed over 60 players, U.S. players over 18 on trial at clubs, including in the U.S., but all over Europe, to a variety of, levels, including the highest level, and then down to the 8th division. Guys just want an experience. They think they can make their way up there. And I'm not going to be the one that tells them they can't. I'll open the door for them, and the rest is on them. So I think that's our biggest bread and butter, is that we can just we have the contacts. I've established them over the past 3-4 years, so that we can get, a guy into a club on a trial within 48 hours. I think that's the beauty of it. So especially when, if we want to send a guy out on loan for 4 months to get experience in a different country because we think he has some growing up to do, we can do that. We have the ability to do that quite seamlessly.
When you guys looked at this, you talked about you had gone to London and experimented with a launch there and a process there, and then decided to come back and do this with NISA. What about NISA intrigued you and ultimately led you guys to pull the trigger?
I think a couple things. I like the calendar, right? A lot of our work is going in conjunction with European leagues, so the calendar makes the transfer windows a lot easier. That's my selfish reasoning. I think the lack of high entry fees, right? They want you to, take your financials, which have to be very thorough, I will say, but they want that to go into the club, into growing the club, and not pumping all your money into the league and then struggling to put, a quality side out. So I think those two components, and just some of the other clubs, like we idolize them. That's our blueprint in terms of like the fan experience. You mentioned Oakland Roots, Detroit City, Chattanooga, even Cosmos. They know what they're doing. They're tapping into this independent marketplace that I think is ever growing. And I think, the evidence is there that a lot of them are packing their stadiums. And I think people want something different. They want a different experience. They watch these European games and on TV, and this may be somewhat closer to, the team you see on the weekend on TV, maybe when Chelsea plays a cup game against a lower league team. Maybe this is that team you can identify with, that doesn't ostracize you. You have some sort of, connection with. It's indescribable as a fan.
Last question here for everybody that's watching this. How can they find out more information about you guys and connect with you guys and follow your journey and your story?
Yeah. So we're on traditional social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Our website should be up in the next 2 weeks. We're actually releasing a cool little teaser video in the coming days on our Instagram page. I would say Instagram is the heaviest, especially. I mean, it pushes it all to Facebook, but Instagram, Facebook are the two where you'll get a ton of content. We want to really do a lot of day in the life stuff, so you can really follow the development of the club. How we went from nothing, just an idea on a napkin, to a pro club in the greatest city in the world. So social media is going to be the track.
And what's the user handle there?
That is at New Amsterdam Football Club.
All right, all spelled out at New Amsterdam Football Club.
Yeah, keep it
awesome.
Yeah,
awesome. Well, thanks, Max, for joining us and on the show, doing this interview. And I know a lot of people have been talking about the possibility of a club. It's been rumored for a while. I talked to people behind the scenes excited about this idea of a New Amsterdam Football Club project being launched. So best of luck to you guys as you get closer to hopefully this all pandemic, settling down and getting onto the field and being able to really fully launch everything. I'd love to have you guys on to talk more about where you're at in the process and maybe even the experience of where you guys are. So thanks for doing this, for coming on the show, and like I said, best of luck forward.
For sure. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to bring clean drinking water right now to every single person on earth. And when you can bring water into communities, it truly transforms them. It changes everything. Or you could know you made a difference. You could know that you had truly impacted the life of a family, of a community, of a region. There was either clean water or there wasn't. We believe in a world where every single person has clean and safe water to drink, and we will continue fighting until that happens.
Thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Really appreciate Max spending some time with us from New Amsterdam Football Club. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that rivalry with the New York Cosmos takes shape in Nice. And I just think it's going to be a fascinating project to follow, where they're looking to kind of base out of the Bronx, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And the name is just really cool. New York is the greatest city on earth. I don't care. You can at me. You can come at me. You can disagree with me, but you are simply wrong. It is my favorite city on earth. I think it's the best city in the world. And one of the cities that is also in my favorites list is Amsterdam in the Netherlands, the original Amsterdam. And to kind of hear about the project that they're doing and kind of trying to link players up with Europe, I really felt like it was really cool, and glad that we were able to get Max on to talk about NAFC and their new club and their project joining Nice. In terms of the show, we opened the show and we kind of went over a letter from one of our viewers that asked to remain anonymous, and I completely understand why, because of the landscape and the culture within U.S. soccer. It's vindictive. It is punitive. If you speak out or speak up, I have seen people lose their jobs over, freely speaking their mind. And sometimes it's not derogatory, the things they're saying. It just may be against what people want to hear or what people want other people to know. Even if it means what's best for the game, people don't want it said. And it's sad. Yesterday, Robson Borba, a listener of the show, sent out a tweet thread and sent it to me to read it and get my thoughts on it. And I wanted to share a little bit of what he had to say, picking up a little bit kind of some of the culture stuff that was included in the letter that we talked about earlier in the show. This is from Robson Borba talking about Jan Quoto, 17-year-old, just signed with Man City for €6 million. He will be the most expensive player my hometown club, Cordoba, has sold. Rafinha second to Schalke at €5 million. In contrast to player development in the U.S., the U.S. Soccer Federation just announced that it has shut down its development academy. Now, giving MLS all the responsibility of youth development in the country with elite youth competition. First of all, I agree in the closing of the DA. After all, it has never been the responsibility of a federation to develop players. That belongs to clubs. And I absolutely agree. I don't think the federation should be developing players. I do believe that the federation has a responsibility to administer competitions, to oversee the administration and organization of a fair, open, and accessible system of connected leagues. I do believe that is the federation's job and duty. I don't believe it is the federation's job to actually take on the development of players. There should not be a standardized U.S. soccer way that you have to develop as a player. Let that spice and flavor come in all sorts of backgrounds from all over the country in all different organizations and clubs. Let them handle the development of their players. Let areas of the country who maybe because of growing up in Wyoming, they focus more on small-sided and futsal, and so their players maybe have a different way of playing than some other players. But let every area of the country and every club in the country handle development. That's my thought. I agree with Robson in that. Like the U.S., Brazil is a really large country, actually bigger if it wasn't for Alaska. So if one were to think of a program to develop young soccer players, it could be very overwhelming. Yet, our soccer culture plays a huge factor in this matter. But let me tell you, if Brazil were to depend on parents paying elite fees for their kids to play in elite clubs so they can become professionals, we would be as relevant in football and soccer as we are in ice hockey. Cordoba FC last season was grinding in Brazil's second division after too many years dancing on the ledge of relegation. Our club right now is a minnow in Brazil. In the same city, there's Atletico Paranaense, and I'm probably butchering this, so Robson, feel free to shout me down on this. Copa do Brasil champions and Copa Sudamericana champions, equivalent to the Europa League. But through our struggles being relegated, it is not the end of the club. The federation's job is to ensure that clubs have a chance to compete, develop players, and be compensated for their work and investment. And if they are presenting good quality on the pitch, they can earn a spot in the big dance. This formula of open markets in soccer is used worldwide. This is the main reason why poor countries in South America and Africa are developing players to elite clubs in Europe. In American soccer, it is not connected to every state, not a fair open competition. It is a market that is closed and manipulated by a certain number of team owners, where they control the federation, closing the doors to any in-house competition. Look how terribly marketed the U.S. Open Cup has been, the oldest soccer competition in the U.S. U.S. soccer needs to be a federation that nurtures the game as a whole and understand that a country this size, with this potential, it's vital to involve every town, no matter the size. If they have the ambition and can produce quality on the pitch, a fair opportunity to compete by merit as it's stated in FIFA's rulebook. Only then will we see clubs all over the country developing true pro soccer players, regardless of parents' financial situation, just like poor countries do it all over the world. Guys, this isn't rocket science. Small clubs in lower divisions are vital to player development, and they can only exist if they are connected to the country's first division. Otherwise, they would fold for the lack of investment and interest. Here in the U.S., is a clear example. So much that our now deceased second division, he's speaking of the NASL, is suing the U.S. Soccer Federation. This closed market leaves soccer clubs to survive only by parents' fees and youth tournaments, never fielding a pro first team. And if they depend solely on parents' money, it explains why our poor urban and rural kids are being left out. This is why we are still a sleeping giant in the world of soccer. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I've talked about this on the show recently, and I just want to say this in commenting on Robson's post. If you are a family and you are paying money into a club, what are you getting for it? What are you getting for it? If you pay $1,000 a year, if you're paying $2,000 a year, $3,000 a year, what are you getting for it? Paying that amount of money for programming, when we look at how the game is administered around the world, is crazy. It's crazy. So what should we be doing? What should that money do? If we're going to ask people to pay in that amount of money, it should go beyond programming. There should be ownership. There should be membership. There should be influence, voting rights, a say. We've shown in this country that people want to invest in the game. They're willing to invest in their own kids and pay thousands of dollars and drive hundreds of miles and get on airplanes and stay in hotels. They are willing to do this for their kids. They're willing to do this for the game. So much so that it is a larger soccer economy than Germany's first division professional league. It's a big deal. There's a lot of money here. Billions with a B dollars here. But it's not getting redirected in the right ways into the game. You have a family that invests $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 and you scholarship another kid and that kid takes their kid's spot, their money's gone. Why? Because they were paying for programming and you didn't give it to them. You took their money and gave it to somebody else. Don't tell me that doesn't happen. It happens all the time. So if we're going to go to a family and say, look, it's going to be $3,000 to pay and we are going to scholarship some kids, but it's not just for programming. Here's a share in the club. Here's your member due and here's your vote. You're now an owner in our club. We're in this together. And maybe their kid doesn't make it. Maybe their kid's just not good enough. Whatever. It may happen. It likely will happen. But that family may own what? 1%? 0.5% in a club? It's something they could be still proud of. Supporters of the club. Invest it for life. Becoming generational families married into the vision of the club and the community that outlast the 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 years that their kids would have paid for programming. We've got to do a rethink of how we do this game in this sport, the game and the sport in this country. And I appreciate Robson and I appreciate this other viewer that sent in the email. And you can do that, as always, in a variety of ways to reach out to us and kind of let us know, what's on your mind. Let us know kind of what you're thinking, what your thoughts are. That is entirely possible to do, and the easiest way to do that is you can DM us on Twitter at Daniel Workman. You can email your questions to team@wrk.mn. You can also find a link to send us an email through the website at danielworkman.com. And always you can text into the show at 1-844-789-8844. That is our show for today. I appreciate Max doing the interview with us the other night and for him coming on the show. And I appreciate these viewers, all of you who watch each and every day, who tune in each and every day, who send words of encouragement in each and every day. We read them all. We try to respond and reply to them all. We appreciate you as well. Hope you have a great day. We look forward to seeing everyone again tomorrow. Goodbye.